Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are continuing our NFL season preview content by talking about the NFC East division. We are going to be giving our full predictions today. Very interesting division. Of course, we have a couple teams who were very hyped up, very successful throughout the regular season last year, very big brands, and both of them in their own ways came crashing down. So I imagine you will have one of those two teams, either the Eagles or the Cowboys at the top of the division, Logan, but I don't know who. Who is, to you, the best team in the NFC East this year?
I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys to win the NFC East this year with a record of 11-6. And the Cowboys, I think, are a pretty safe team to bank on. We did an episode a couple of weeks ago of the Joel Moran show, and I earmarked Dallas as a contender I was worried about. But that really pertains to the playoffs. The Cowboys have been wildly successful in the regular season. They've been super consistent. This is the only team in the NFL with 12 wins in each of the last 3 seasons. They have the second best regular season record overall since 2021. That's only behind the Chiefs. And they've also been top 5 in points per game the last 3 seasons. In fact, they've led the NFL, Carson, in points in 2 of the last 3 seasons. Like, they have been super consistent. Now, I do want to preface this preview with I'm a little concerned about the drama going on right now behind the scenes with CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jones. I don't dig that. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't know. It's confusing to me, Carson, why an owner would ever be like, he's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Hey,
He
Jerry,
tried to walk it back, but you know Jerry, man.
Jerry, get your old head out of your ass, man. CeeDee's a top 5 wideout in football. Just go pay the man whatever he wants.
$800 million.
Yeah.
Would you give that to CD?
Mm-hmm. Whatever I'd give him the team, man. I'd give him the franchise. So
It's good business.
basically, Carson, I think the Cowboys are going to be really good in the regular season again. The offense does lose Tyron Smith. They lose their center, Tyler Biadasz, and they lose Tony Pollard. But I really trust this team in the regular season. Defensively, you're bringing back Micah Parsons, who led the NFL with 102 pressures last season. Trayvon Diggs is fully healthy. He is going to form a really potent tandem of playmaking corners with him and Deron Bland. And last season, Dak had a real career year. This offense did, in fact, too. They were the number 1 scoring offense. They were the number 2 offense in terms of points per drive, yards per drive, and they were top 10 in terms of passing offense overall and offensive yards per play. So I really like this formula. I trust Dak Prescott a lot to lead a consistent offense, to make good decisions, especially, again, that's why I emphasize I think CeeDee Lamb has to be out there because I don't like this offense overall if CeeDee isn't out there. It needs to be Dak and CeeDee.
Yeah.
I like Jake Ferguson. As much as I like Jake Ferguson, he's not going to be, the difference maker in making this team one of the best offenses in football. It is powered behind a rock-solid offensive line, and I think they have really retooled masterfully over the past few seasons, despite them losing out on some guys. I do have a question mark at the new center spot. I'm a little worried, an undrafted guy. I think Hoffman is going to step in, and he's going to be the starter there, so I'm a little worried about that. But overall, I trust the offensive line. I trust Dak. I trust CeeDee Lamb. And then defensively, they got ballers. Again, I mentioned Micah Parsons. They bring back DeMarcus Lawrence. They've got playmakers on the in the secondary. They lose some pieces there, most notably Dorrance Armstrong, who has 15.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons. That's not just a loss that you're going to wipe away, which is why I have the Cowboys winning 1 less game. Right? I think these minor losses make a little bit of a difference, but overall, I think they're going to beat up on the bottom 2 teams in this division. I think they're going to outscore a lot of teams in the regular season. They're going to be relatively consistent. The big question mark, as it is with a lot of teams, is how are the Cowboys going to play when the lights are bright? They've won a whopping 1 playoff game under Mike McCarthy. That was versus a sub-500 Buccaneers team with a hobbled and old Tom Brady with a horrible offensive line. And Dak is 2-5 in the playoffs. So all of my concerns with the Cowboys basically come with the playoffs. I expect this team to win this division. I expect them to be near the top of the NFC. Can they get it done when it matters? That's the big question. That is always the big question when it comes with the Dallas Cowboys. That is the area I remain skeptical. And to conclude this, the reason I expect a little bit of regression, again, is a little bit of the roster turnover. I think Dak had a career season last year. I think it's going to be really hard to expect him to play at an MVP level. I expect Dak to be great, but to expect him to play at an MVP level like he was last year, I think is a little much. Turnover margins, this is a defense that was predicated on a lot of big plays, sacks, turnovers. They're going to do a lot of that. Are they going to perform at the level they were last year? I'm a little skeptical. And then it's the run offense and the run defense. The run offense was not great last year. They were 20th in yards per attempt. I don't know who the hell is going to start, if it's going to be Zeke, if it's going to be one of these guys who's been on the bench the last couple years. And then it's the run defense. I'm still skeptical that this run defense is going to be good. I expect them to improve. They bring in a former Buffalo Bill, who I know you and I were very fond of, in Jordan Phillips. And Mozzie Smith should get more burn this year. Hopefully he has a better sophomore season than he does a rookie season. Those are the reasons I'm expecting a little bit of regression here from Dallas. But I expect this to be one of the best and most consistent regular season teams in football, as they've been.
Yeah, I think that we view the Cowboys pretty similarly. I also view them as the best team in this division. I have them going 10-7. I would put the over-under for wins this year at 10.5 for them, and I toggled back and forth between 10 and 11. But I do think they've suffered some important losses offensively. You talk about the offensive line with Tyron Smith, who has consistently been elite at the left tackle spot, and they prioritize that in the draft. They take Tyler Guyton in the first round. But those are big shoes to fill for any rookie replacing a consistent elite lineman like that. Biotish, as you mentioned, they lose. He's consistently been very good. And then you lose Tony Pollard in the run game. And I understand that we don't tend to view running backs as difference makers necessarily, outside of a few very elite guys at the position. But I just can't imagine entering the season in 2024 with Ezekiel Elliott as your RB1. And that is currently the situation that the Dallas Cowboys are in. I mean, Zeke is not a starting running back. I can tell you that. He just averaged 3.5 yards per attempt in New England. But the year before that, behind that great Cowboys line, 3.8 yards per attempt. So I do think that this line is still above average. I don't think it is going to be the elite unit that it has been for so long. And that's where I'm just worried about the run game, because the overwhelming strength of this Cowboys offense has been predicated upon the fact that we can run the ball down your throat and we're an elite passing attack. And I'm just not sure that they're going to have that running dimension at the same level that they have over the last few years. I still think the passing game will be great. I do agree with you. I don't know how Dak could play better than last year. I mean, 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He was incredible in the regular season. But I still think that the passing attack should honestly be pretty similarly effective to that. The weapons are very good with Cooks and Ferguson, presuming that CD figures this out. They offered him $33 million. He wouldn't take that. Jettis has set the market at $35 million. My guess is that CD probably will not be inclined to take less than that. But I don't know that this goes on into the season, considering he still has a year left on his contract. It's not a great situation, but I don't necessarily view it as like a huge red flag for this season. So I expect the Cowboys to be a really, really good offense, an elite offense, just maybe not like last year where they're the number 1 scoring offense, they're number 2 in yards per drive. They're basically the best offense in football because of some of those questions about the line and the run game that I do now have. Defensively, I think this team should be much better equipped actually for the postseason. You mentioned having more concerns about the Cowboys there. I felt like that's where we just saw them completely exposed defensively. And I think the upgrade from Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer as your defensive coordinator is a meaningful one. Zimmer has consistently proven himself to be a really good defensive coach. In Minnesota, he took over a defense that was dead last in scoring the year before he got there, turned them into the number 11 defense, then led 5 straight top 10 defenses. And you mentioned the run game is such a concern. I watched my Buffalo Bills run all over the Dallas Cowboys in a way that I have never seen us do to anybody. We watched the Green Bay Packers explode on the Cowboys both through the air and on the ground, but so much of it was set up by the fact that they just could not stop the run game. That opened up the play action, that opened up those explosive chunk plays through the air as well. That's where they got gashed last year, and they were just 15th in yards per attempt allowed. And there were several games in which it was really, really concerning. But I think Zimmer is going to make that more of a priority. I think Eric Kendricks is a good add, especially to a Zimmer scheme. The Cowboys lose Leighton Vander Esch, who didn't really play that much last year, only appeared in 5 games. But I think you upgrade at that spot, add a quality player. And I think just with a better defensive coach, they can tighten up some of the disasters on the back end that you had under Quinn, who really was, in a lot of ways, gunning for those big plays defensively. Getting back Trayvon Diggs also really helps the secondary. He has the reputation for being one of those splashy plays guys, but I think he's honestly probably gotten underrated as a cover corner, and obviously you just want one of your best players healthy and available. You mentioned they lose Dorrance Armstrong. They draft Marshawn Nealon in the second round. He's playing well. I'm with you on looking at Mozzie Smith. It would be really nice if he could take a leap at DT, but I do feel better about this defense overall. I'm just not sure that it'll actually be better in the regular season, because in the regular season, the Cowboys defense was mostly dominant. As you mentioned, huge sack numbers, huge takeaway numbers, absolutely ate alive the shitty quarterback carousel, right? Think about what they did to the Giants, in the Jets, in the Pats, in the early weeks of the year. It was like they completely obliterated the bad teams, which made them look probably like a better defense than they actually were based on the regular season numbers. So at the end of the day, I just think they're too talented to not be a very good team. They have a top 8 quarterback, top 5 receiver, top 10-ish tight end, above average line, probably the best edge duo in football with Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence. Very talented secondary, especially when it comes to playmakers. And I do think that they now have a coaching upgrade on the defensive side of the ball with Mike Zimmer. They did lose some important talent. And last year, I talked about the defensive numbers being a bit inflated. They did just beat up on shitty teams overall. I mean, they were beating these bad teams by, 30 points, which is good, but they were 3-4 versus playoff teams in the regular season. Against high-end competition, they weren't dominant whatsoever. So it feels appropriate to pick them to drop off by a win or two. I'm with you there. And their playoff success is ultimately going to come down to how improved is that defense and what version of Dak do you get. And honestly, I actually feel that those two categories couldn't really possibly go worse than they did last year. And therefore, to me, this is a more dangerous, a more promising playoff team. Last year was an absolute disaster, obviously, in their one playoff game. But I don't think it'll be as dominant a regular season. And I don't think that it is as talented a football team, quite as talented as last year.
Yeah, I think they are going to be more dangerous. And you make a good point there. This team should be a little more battle tested than last year. This isn't a cupcake schedule. Even if that does mean there's regression in terms of wins, they're facing a lot more better competition week to week, where I think that legitimately matters. And to add on to some of what you said, this is a homecoming for Mike Zimmer. I'm excited for him. He was the defensive coordinator in the mid-2000s for Dallas before getting this. I think he's better than Dan Quinn. I am a little bit concerned about the linebacking core, and not just at the top. I'm worried about the depth. I think Eric Kendricks is a little bit slower now. He's regressed a little bit. He was once one of the best linebackers in football. Mm-hmm. He's still serviceable, but I'm a little bit worried about their depth and just guys. If he goes down, I just worry about who you're turning to after that. So that is a little bit of a red flag for me. Again, I expect improvement with Zimmer's defense, but just personnel there, I'm a little worried. And then overall, just in terms of football theory, what you were talking about with this running offense and running defense, the way it handcuffs you is if this run defense isn't tangibly improved, that's just something that teams are going to be able to. If they go up on you, it's an area where the Cowboys aren't going to be able to crawl back in games. You're going to get marched on. There's going to be long, methodical drives where you're not touching the football. And then on the inverse of that, if you are up in football games, which is where Dallas really thrived last season, getting up early and just running teams out of the building, I'm worried about if they can't run the football, and that's just in terms of if you have a lead and you're trying to hold on to games. It's just great teams can stop good rushing attacks and can run the football. That's still the biggest area of concern for Dallas.
For sure.
But again, these are all basically playoff concerns to me. And Dak, in a lot of ways, I've been very critical of him. Dak's one of the most strong variables in this team that I'm banking
Absolutely.
on. I just trust Dak in a different way than I have in years previous, where I don't, he's not like my big. 3 years ago, would you ask me this, I'd be like, yeah, Dak's a big question mark. He isn't, man. Dak is probably the bedrock of this team at this point in his career.
Totally. I mean, he has to be, right? The line, again, has lost some talent. The run game, you have more concerns about. You are betting on, of course, CD being great, but Dak playing like a consistent, real high-end quarterback, and I think he will. And again, last year in the playoffs, Dak was bad. He was really bad when it mattered, when that was still a competitive game. He threw a pick six. He was out of sync with his guys. But the biggest problem was that they were a disaster defensively. And I think if they can get that together, which I expect them to do much more so this year, then I think that Dak is going to give you a chance to make some real playoff noise. I think that he is the favorite to outduel most of these quarterbacks in the NFC. I mean, I think he is easily one of the absolute best quarterbacks in the conference. So I am more optimistic about them when it comes to the postseason this year. Another reason that I have them just winning 10 games in the regular season, first of all, I think some of the vibe stuff with CD, I don't know, it just feels like there's potential. There's more turnover on this roster than we've seen in recent years. So I think there can be a little bit of a feeling out period there. But it is also the schedule, right? You have the AFC North. Those are 4 tough games right there. You have the number 1 schedule that has you going up against the Lions, has you going to San Francisco, have to play the Eagles twice within your own division. It's not the toughest schedule, but it is a pretty legit schedule, I would say. Okay, to me, Logan, there is not a big gap between Dallas and the Philadelphia Eagles whatsoever. Presuming that you have them in the 2 spot, what's your expectation for them this year?
No, there isn't a ton of separation between these two teams. I have them separated by 1 game. I have the Eagles winning 10. And in a lot of ways, these two teams ended in very disappointing fashions, right? The Cowboys have that complete letdown of a game against Green Bay. Philadelphia goes 1-6 in their final 7 games, and they lose in the wild card round to my baby boy Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. This team had 28 offensive turnovers last season, combined with being one of the worst defenses in all of football. And that was what we harped on during the regular season last year. We kept waiting for the bottom to fall out. The Eagles would be eking out these wins against not great competition. And then it kind of came crashing down. They were the number 30 scoring defense. They were also the number 30 team in defensive points per drive. They were 31 in defensive yards per drive, and they were bottom 10 in defensive yards per play. Just overall, outside of being a team that could get pressure home, the defense didn't do a whole lot well. I do expect improvement there. They add in some very big pieces. You get Bryce Huff from the Jets, which is a massive add. They fleece New York, Carson. They let Hassan Reddick go and they trade him there, right? They take Bryce Huff from him, who is younger. They give him a contract that is more beneficial to them than getting Hassan Reddick because they probably couldn't agree on terms. And now, reportedly, he wants out of New York. So they absolutely hustle the Jets.
Jets, Jets.
Just typical Jets nonsense, man. What can go wrong will go wrong if you're a New York Jet and a Jets fan. They bring back C.J. Gardner-Johnson, whose injury shortened his season with Detroit last year. They need help on that end. I'm so glad they invested there. They draft Quinyon Mitchell in the first round out of Toledo. They draft Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. They really invest in their back end where they need the most help. And they also add in Devin White, which I think is a major, major add to this defense. So they have made upgrades there. And there's also a lot of other variable change in here with Philadelphia. You have a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. You have a new defensive coordinator. You have Saquon Barkley now on offense. So the biggest question for this team is, can they tangibly improve defensively on the back end? And I think yes. I think you're looking at a team that can be an average defense this year, and you're looking at a team that probably should be a top 10 offense or fringe top 10 offense.
Yeah.
But after saying that, you may be asking yourself, so why is this team only winning 10 games, right? They got a rock-solid offensive line. They've got talent everywhere, skill positions offensively. They improved at all 3 levels defensively. I don't like a lot of variable change. In any situation in the National Football League, when you're looking at this many moving pieces and moving cogs, I always just throw up a red flag and I go, okay, the transition's probably not going to be as smooth as everybody thinks it's going to be, right? You may look at this team talent-wise and go, oh, they could win 13 games. They could win the NFC maybe. There's just so many moving parts, and when there are this many moving parts and pieces with any team, I just expect it to be a little harder to achieve that kind of expectation. So this really has no bearing on what I think this team can do in the playoffs. I think it's going to be a great regular season team. I think they very well could win this division over Dallas.
Yeah.
I think the head-to-head matchup is going to determine who wins this division. So it's not that the margins aren't that large between Philly and Dallas, and I wholeheartedly look at both of these teams in this division as real deal contenders that could make noise in the playoffs. So I have them winning 10 games, but I think this is an exceptionally talented team. It's really what kind of improvements they can make on the back end. Can this be a great secondary? And yeah, can they just be better than last year? Can they limit the big shot plays? That's why I picked Tampa Bay to win that playoff game, right? Tampa Bay is a great shot play team. They have a lot of explosive plays. Philadelphia surrenders a lot of those shot plays. Can they cut out the big explosive plays defensively? And can they just be more consistent on them? Those are my big questions for Philly. But I think this is a real contender in the NFC.
I have Philly winning 10 games as well. And 10 wins for both these teams does kind of feel on the low end, but I do have some concerns about both. I do think that last year left a pretty sour taste in my mouth for both teams, and that doesn't mean that I don't think that they can have better playoff outings, because I expect them both to. When it comes down to why I prefer Dallas to Philly, it comes down to the two most important aspects of any team, in my opinion: the defense collectively and the quarterback position. I have a lot more faith in that Dallas defense, and I have honestly a lot more faith in Dak Prescott as a consistent high-level quarterback than I do Jalen Hurts. In a lot of ways, Jalen Hurts is the key factor to the ceiling that the Eagles can reach this year, because he regressed in a real, meaningful, glaring way last year, and he needs to be significantly better this year. I think Philly needs to get back to more RPOs. He had fewer than half as many yards off RPOs last year as he did the year prior, when he was extremely efficient there. He needs to be way better under pressure. He was a disaster there. When blitzed, had a passer rating of 74 through 6 touchdowns to 8 picks. Has to make quicker decisions. I thought that we saw him really struggle to dissect complex coverages last year. He had over 3 seconds on average time to throw, and he has to take much better care of the football. He had 20 turnovers. So he still has an elite receiving core, right? One of the best wide receiver tandems in football. You lose Kelsey, but still have a really good offensive line in front of you, an elite offensive line. You now have, in my opinion, an elite running back. I think that Saquon is excellent, and I understand that he wasn't an efficient runner last year, but you have to think about how nightmarish that situation is. No ability to throw the ball, really bad offensive line. He carried that offense as much as he could. With him out there, they averaged 17 points per game. Not much, but without him over a few games, they averaged 10 points per game. So I do think he is a really impactful player at the position because of his ability to run the ball and also what he can do as a pass catcher. And I think that he should make them a more dominant rushing attack, more similar to what we saw back in 2022, and add that receiving dimension out of the backfield. But ultimately, I think that their success is going to hinge on Jalen Hurts, his progress as a passer in all those key areas that I just mentioned. And there are a lot of areas in which he needs to get better, and what Kellen Moore can bring as an offensive coordinator, because I thought the play calling last year was not very good, not very creative. I do consider Moore an upgrade there. Those to me are kind of the two spots to look at for this Philly offense. And defensively, it is shocking how bad this unit actually was last year. They allowed quarterbacks to throw for almost 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns to 9 picks against them. They were 20th in yards allowed per rushing attempt. They were 23rd in turnovers forced. So they couldn't stop you through the air. They couldn't stop you on the ground. They couldn't make those big swing plays. And situationally, they were like the worst team in football. 31st in third down defense, 25th in fourth down defense, 30th in red zone defense. And just 1 year after having their all-time great pass rush in 2022, the 70 sacks unit, they were just 13th in pressure rate. They were average there and disastrous basically everywhere else. And there is some real turnover on that front. You mentioned, I think Bryce Huff is a good add as well to compensate for the Reddick loss, especially with how things have played out in terms of contract negotiations for Reddick. You do lose Fletcher Cox, though, and you have your young studs. You have Jalen Carter. You have Jordan Davis. Those are real high-impact guys. And as you mentioned, they add a lot of talent to the secondary. I also think that Vic Fangio is an improvement as your defensive coordinator. So with the talent they have, especially up front, I just cannot see how they struggle as much as last year on that side of the ball. But when you look at their win total and say, okay, last year they were 11-6. This year, they've improved their defensive talent. They've improved their coaching staff. Jalen Hurts really can't be worse than he was last year. Why aren't they winning more games? Because they were a fraudulent 11-6 last year. They had a total point differential, Logan, not per game, total point differential of +5 as an 11-win team. They were really an average football team that was scraping out miraculous wins early in the year for the first half of the year, and then they fell apart at the end. So I don't think they're nearly as good as their record suggested last year, and I think that we very much saw that in those final 7 games. But the thing, just to hammer it home, for their status as an actual contender if they are a team that I believe can go out there and make a deep playoff run, or if they are just a team that will get to the first round of the playoffs on the back of their talent, and then their holes will get exposed, is Jalen Hurts. And particularly down the stretch last year, he was brutal. Last 7 games, 201 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 5 picks, 81 passer rating. He has to turn it around, as does this defense. And though I expect him to improve in both of those respects, I don't have as much faith there as I do in the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Now, I'm encouraged that Hurts is going to have a better year than last year. One, because I think that's the low end. I really hope that's the worst year of his career. Like, I just think Hurts is so much more talented at that. But, again, that's the reality of going from a genius offensive coordinator and Shane Steichen, who I think he could make any quarterback look really good. I mean, he almost made the playoffs with Indianapolis with Gardner Minshew at the helm last year. So,
Court job, white boy, though. Give him his respect.
I think the best thing they can do for Hurts this year is to just run Saquon, is just use him as much as possible. I mean, I am getting back to that identity. That was the identity that the Eagles had during their title run. Now, granted, you do lose Jason Kelce. That is not a minor loss. He is a Hall of Fame center, one of the greatest we have ever seen at that position, so that's a major loss. But I still love the rest of this offensive line. I still think they're one of, I think they're a top 10 unit there. So I'm leaning more heavily on Saquon I'm leaning more heavily on Saquon. I'm leaning more into RPOs like you mentioned with Jalen Hurts. I just think that's what he does better. And the thing I'm looking for more is a guy who likes to take a lot of shot plays. Certainly dial those up for this offense, but I want quick hitting stuff. I want to get the ball to these guys in space. Simplify it for Jalen. That's the thing. Like, I do think Hurts is a really good talent, but when you have the kind of guys, the kind of personnel that Philadelphia has, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, we don't have to get cute. We don't have to dial up the kind of gnarly concepts that are going to pick apart. So get the ball to these guys in space, in one-on-one, and let them go to work. Just simplify Jalen's job, make it easier for him.
Totally.
With the talent that we've seen this team upgrade on defensively, I'm encouraged. I think it's going to be, again, it may not reflect it in the record, like you said, because I think that it's almost flukish that they got out to that kind of red-hot start. They were eking out wins. So it may not be reflected in the record, but I do think this team is going to be better than last year.
I agree. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the Hurts point. I mean, what was 2022 Jalen Hurts? Throughout the regular season and throughout the first couple playoff games, he was like a star game manager, right? I mean, he was taking care of the football. He was efficient as a passer. And then his ability to make plays with his legs was what made him an elite quarterback that season. But I think that there was a lot more pressure on him to consistently push the ball downfield through the air, to carry that offense last year, and it didn't work. RPOs, play action, which comes from, as you mentioned, really dominating on the ground, which was the key when that offense looked its best. They ran a lot less play action last year. He had like 500 fewer play action yards. So I think Hurts will have a better year, but I was concerned by what we saw this past year, and I do not think that he is on Dak's level. The one last thing that I want to touch on with the Eagles is just Nick Sirianni. I do not understand why he is the head coach of this football team. Last year, after that meltdown, like, you easily could have justified firing him. But then the story in recent weeks has been about his rift with Jalen Hurts, how they were basically incompatible throughout last year. What value is a quote-unquote CEO head coach, which is how Sirianni has always been described, right? He doesn't call plays on either side of the ball, when he can't do anything to like emotionally galvanize you, save you from slipping in one of the most catastrophic collapses to a season that we've seen, and when he has a bad relationship with your franchise quarterback. And you just saw it, right? You lose both coordinators, you fall off as a football team last year because their coordinators were actually really good 2 years ago. I don't really care about losing the coordinators this year because I didn't think that they were very good, but I'm just perplexed by Sirianni, and I do wonder if he is holding this team back, and maybe if the move is to ultimately promote Kellen Moore to that head coach role. I'm not sure exactly what it looks like. I'm just out on Sirianni.
I don't know if Moore's ready for that role yet.
Yeah.
But I think you make a phenomenal point about Sirianni. I mean, if there is a rift between him and Hurts, if there is, real merit to that story coming out, then what added value does he bring? Just a guy that is going to ride the wave with the team, that's going to be really high and up when they're winning and then really down in the dumps and bringing them down when they're losing. I don't like that. So in a lot of ways, I think this is a prove-it year for Sirianni, where if I think they got to win double-digit games. I think they got to make the playoffs, and it cannot be a wet fart of a playoff game like it was last year, where they it's just you shouldn't have lost to the Bucs. Look, man, I'm the biggest Bucs supporter in the world. I love Baker Mayfield. The Bucs were not as talented as the Eagles were last year, and the strengths of that team, even though the Eagles were in this huge letdown, they were just crumbling as the season went along. That was not a playoff game they should have lost. So I do think if this is a letdown of a year, I think Sirianni's gone, and I think it would be justified. This team is much too talented to have another letdown of a season this year.
Completely agreed, and I still think that both of these teams are among the 4, certainly 5 best teams in the NFC. You go Lions, you go Niners, and then I think I would still go these two. I do think that they are more talented than the Packers. I think I definitely trust them more than the Falcons. Like, they check a lot of boxes in terms of talent. It's just we need to see improvement from last year. And things can't really get worse than how they ended last year for either of these teams. So I do prefer the Cowboys, but I could see either one of these teams absolutely in the NFC title game. And I expect them both, even if their records aren't better, to actually be better football teams than last year. Been hungry for some college football? Well, we finally get a taste this weekend. Don't miss any of the action. Jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook.
It's a small but mighty slate of games for Week 0, including a big matchup in Ireland. This is going to be DraftKings' biggest college football season to date. Enjoy the ride now all the way through the expanded playoffs. Plus, all newbies getting into the college spirit, here's something extra special. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly.
Score big with DraftKings all college football season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's move on to the bottom tier of this division, Logan. We have our 2 top teams who should be in the playoffs, and then we have our 2 teams that are going to be hoping to win 5 games. Who do you prefer between the Commanders and the Giants?
I have the Commanders here in the 3rd spot of this division, Carson. I do have them clearing that 5-win benchmark, just barely. I have them winning 6 games, and I think they're going to be better. This is finally the stick of dynamite into this franchise that they have needed. They are going into a full reboot, a complete organizational overhaul. Head coach Dan Quinn is in. Offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury is in. Defensive coordinator Joe Witt is in. You have a new rookie QB in Jayden Daniels. Offensively, you're infused with some new talent. Austin Eckler, Zach Ertz, be it as up front. Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, Dorrance Armstrong defensively. So I'm actually expecting an above-average defense. I think with the improvements they have made there, I think that Dan Quinn can make this a pretty solid defense. And I'm expecting a slightly below-average offense. I just don't expect it to be explosive. Washington's got a pretty tough schedule. And so I think their playoff and ceiling hopes really hinge on rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels. I've liked what I've seen from him in the preseason, and I think this is going to be a good union between Kingsbury and Daniels. A lot of short, intermediate concepts. I think, like Hurts, they should lean into a lot of RPOs. And I think you've already seen that his legs are a real weapon. Daniels has made quick decisions. He gets the ball out fast. And I think to win games, he just needs to protect the football. I think if Daniels can manage these games, he should be able to get Washington into about 6 or 7 games. Now, I do have some concerns. He does this really weird thing that I've noticed on tape, Carson, where he throws off his back foot. He's almost fading away when he's uncomfortable. If he's not balanced. If he's under pressure or if he's changing his read, going through his progressions, he just has this tendency to lean on his back foot, and that'll lead to him airmailing throws really bad, and it just completely throws his balance off. I think that's something that he's going to have to work on. When he is balanced, though, Daniels throws a really pretty deep ball, and I really like what Washington has done around him. Adding Eckler, that is an invaluable weapon to have. I know he can't run the ball, but just having that kind of guy out of the backfield that you can check the ball down to, that is massive for a young quarterback, just having that kind of check down guy. They invest in the offensive line. So, yeah, I mean, this is a team that really can't get much worse than last year, Carson. They were dead last in scoring defense. They were dead last in defensive points per drive and yards per drive. And they were bottom 10 in terms of passing offense and offense overall in points per drive and yards per drive. So, yeah, I'm expecting a lot of improvement, especially defensively. I think they can climb into being an average to an above average defense. And in that kind of number 20 to like average tier of offense. But like I said, I think this really hinges on what you get out of Jayden Daniels and how he manages these games. I think they've put a good support system around him, though. I was really worried, if Daniels goes to a different situation where he doesn't have a smart offensive coordinator or he doesn't have weapons around him. I was really worried. I like the structure that they have around Jayden Daniels, and that's why I'm confident in this being the third team in the NFC East. So this is not the year that Washington is going to break through and have this drastic turnaround. I think this is a multi-year thing where
For sure.
next year or year 3, Washington could break through into real conversations. But it really all hinges on Jayden Daniels, man, what we get out of him and the kind of growth and if he can be the building block of this team moving forward.
It's all about Jayden. And I thought that he was clearly QB3 in this class, which is not a bad thing. I just loved Caleb, thought he was a generational prospect. And I love Drake May. I thought that he got really underrated as the draft process went on. I think that he is a truly special arm talent and has the improvisational instincts that I'm looking for in an elite quarterback. I just think he is a much, much, much better thrower of the football than Jayden. But obviously, Jayden has elite speed. He has elite elusiveness. That's what makes him so intriguing as a prospect. And he can take the easy stuff. He's accurate. I do think that his passing numbers were inflated in that LSU offense by playing with an absurd receiving core. I don't think that he is a great arm talent. And I do worry about his frame and his ability to protect himself. I like Jayden as a prospect. I just think taking him over May was a mistake. But I do think he's an upgrade from Sam Howell, even as a rookie. I just expect him to be a below average starter as a rookie. I like the Kingsbury fit here, but I don't love the offensive talent around him. Adding Eckler, yes, is nice to have for checkdowns. Brian Robinson will still get the bulk of the carries, but I don't love the run game here. They add Biotish and Allegretti to the O-line. They really overhaul that unit. I still think they're below average there. They lose Curtis Samuel, so Scary Terry is very good, but the rest of the receiving core basically sucks. I just think there is a lot of pressure on Jayden and his ability to constantly stress the defense and use his legs a lot, because just managing the game here isn't going to cut it. I mean, what is your strength? It's not your line. It's probably not your run game. It's not your playmakers in the passing game, your receivers. Like, there is going to have to be a lot of Jayden carrying this offense basically from the jump, in my opinion. And that's a lot of pressure because we both went to ASU, Logan. I covered the ASU football team when Jayden Daniels was the starting quarterback. I saw him in a situation where he had solid talent. He had a good line. He had an NFL running back in Rashad White. He had 2 receivers who we just saw get drafted this year in Ricky Pearsall, Johnny Wilson, who really wasn't that good, but hell of an athlete, got drafted, right? That was a talented football team, and he was fine. He was pretty average. And there's no doubt that he's improved a lot since then. I think one of the biggest things is just his willingness to use his legs so much. I do think he's improved as a thrower, but young Jayden Daniels, kind of wanted to be a pocket passer, and I think that he was limiting his greatest weapon there. But I don't think it's a coincidence that the year he popped, he had 2 game-breaking first-round receiver talents in Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. That's not a normal situation. That's not the situation he's walking into at all here in Washington. And so that does just make me a little concerned about his ability to carry the offense and to live up to his status as the second pick. Defensively, I do expect this team to be a lot better, but they were awful last year. You mentioned all the categories in which they were worst in the league. I'll do the same thing I did for the Eagles. Quarterbacks threw for 4,500 yards, 39 touchdowns to 8 picks against them last year, and teams ran for 2,155 yards and 15 touchdowns with 4.5 yards per attempt. They were dead last in pressure rate, just a ridiculously bad defense. And they bring in a bunch of dudes: Luvu, Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Cleveland Farrell. All of those guys are new starters. And they drafted Mike Sainristy in the second round who should be like their top nickel corner. I think there's a lot of solid starters in that group. I think that will make them much more respectable, but they still don't have studs on that side of the ball outside of maybe Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, but they didn't really play their best football last year. They certainly weren't able to save that unit or even to save just the defensive front. So I think it'll be a dramatically improved defense, but where they're coming from, dramatically improved, probably still means pretty average to me. And I worry about that offensive formula. I worry about the talent around Jayden. I do not think that he is the sort of exceptional talent who overcomes. I think he is more a guy who you put in positions to succeed, and then it's okay. The quick passing game is going, and the RPOs and the play action is working, and he's able to make plays with his legs. Then I think that that's the situation in which he'll be best set up to succeed, and I don't think he's walking into that in year one. I also don't love Dan Quinn as head coach here. I did not think that was a good hire. So I have Washington winning 5 games. I thought about a cheeky 6, but I still have a lot of concerns about this team, especially offensively.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think Jayden's that kind of elevator at this point, and I had Jayden much lower. He has impressed me in the preseason, right? I think Bo Nix is probably a little bit more well-equipped to – and Denver's still a hellish situation, much like Washington too, so I'm not expecting much from them either. But just in terms of pro style, like leading an offense, there's just areas where I think Jayden's a little more raw. I worry about his slight frame too. You talk about him running, I worry about him taking one too many hits and getting crushed. But I think Washington is a team that is going to have to win games on the back of their defense. They're going to be defensive duels where Jayden makes good decisions, like you said. Running games going, short passing games going. Once you set all that up, you hit some big shot plays that can bust it open. So, can't get much worse for Washington, right? That's why you had the second pick. I'm glad that they finally hit the button. They redid everything. They get the evil Dan Snyder out, man. It's time for it's time to actually go out and win some football games. But to be clear, though, you do have Washington in your third spot, or do you have them at the bottom? Okay.
I do have them in my third spot. Before we move on, what do you think is Jayden's ceiling as a quarterback? The reasonable ceiling that you sort of expect him to hit or, flirt with that range?
I think Jayden can be an average starter, and I don't mean that as disrespectfully. Like, I think Jayden could be like it's all about the technical stuff. Like, I think as a runner, like I said, I think Jayden needs to be cautious and needs to be okay with sliding and not trying to – he's not Lamar. Like, he's got speed like on that level, but he's not, like, as dynamic as a, juke in and spin, and he's not as agile and that kind of creator. So I think Jayden – and, again, with his sleight of frame, I worry about him taking hits. So I think he needs to be a little more conservative when he's in the open field and just going down when guys are coming to hit him and not trying to do too much. And then passing – if he figures out that technical, like, being confident in the pocket, making, being a little more cool, calm, and collected and not doing that, if he can figure out his balance, he throws a great deep ball, man. Like, I think he could be a really good explosive playmaker, but I think it's going to take a couple years in the league to figure out. Jayden showed those flashes, man. You talk about it his first year at ASU. His freshman year, I mean, we were saying this guy looks like a future first-round QB, and then obviously he regressed, and we see him at LSU. He has the Heisman year. And I don't mean that as disrespectful. When I say an average quarterback, I mean that as like 16th in the NFL, which is a damn good quarterback. There's just so much talent in the NFL today. I want to see him be efficient this year. I want to see him take all the easy stuff and not try to do too much. And I don't mean this as a disrespectful comp, so if he can be Tyrod Taylor this first year, I think that's a successful season. And go from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If he can be Tyrod this first year, I'm going to be very happy. Take care of the football, make good decisions, scramble when you need to, not try to do too much, and take shots when they're there. I think that's a successful campaign. But are you higher on him? Do you see a kind of top 10 ceiling eventually with Jayden's skill set?
Maybe put him in a great situation. We were just talking about 2022 Jalen Hurts. I don't know. If you gave Jayden Daniels that sort of line, that sort of run game, that sort of receiver talent, I could see him producing at that level maybe down the line, but that's a really ideal situation. I think average QB is reasonable expectation, and I don't dislike the Tyrod comp. In fact, I was thinking of it myself. Tyrod, real game manager. I think that you would just pray that Jayden is a little bit more aggressive than that, because Tyrod was like the most conservative guy I've ever seen, but really took care of the football, threw a beautiful deep ball when he did let it rip. The difference is Jayden is a much more special mover. Tyrod could move not close to the way that Jayden can, so he should definitely be better than Tyrod. For year one, that would be an impressive level of poise, I would say, but he definitely has more upside within him. But yeah, not everybody in this class is going to be a home run. I'm much more confident in Caleb and Drake May, but I also think that Jayden has a lot of tools, and I do think he's a starter in this league. I just don't think he's an elite one. All right, Logan, let's get to the bottom of the pile here. The New York Football Giants, building on a magical season. Tommy touchdown and the boys. Magic is in the air for them. Danny Dimes is back. Hooray. What is your prediction for them?
I think the Giants have a chance to be the worst team in the NFL this upcoming season. I have them going 4-13. And let me tell you, brother, when I was going through that schedule, it was tough finding them 4 wins, bruh.
Yeah, man.
It was tough finding them 4 wins.
Yeah.
I thought about capping them at 3, but I feel like in predictions, if you go below 4, it's just like, I don't know. Like, that's a different level of disrespect. The primary reason why, Daniel Jones is and always has been a lame duck. I called it when he entered the league, when I saw him play just last year, before when we were doing trivia with the BDG boys. You guys pushed back. I said, I think this guy's one of the worst QBs in the league, and you were like,
if I remember correctly, the only thing I pushed back on was you said bottom 5, and I think I said like bottom 8 to 10.
Okay. And they were like...
And to be fair, he probably is bottom 5. You were probably right, but I didn't push back on the idea that Danny Dimes is bad.
Yeah. Which I've always said. I said when he got the contract, don't pay this guy. People trying to posture up and tell me that he was an average quarterback was ridiculous to me. Since entering the league, just real quick, I got some numbers because I hate this guy. Most turnovers per game by a quarterback. 26th in total yards per game by a quarterback. 34th in completion percentage, and my favorite number here. Carson, he's 47th in passer rating since entering the league.
That's
so
impressive.
It was a colossally dumb decision to pay Daniel Jones that money, right? But the issue wasn't just paying Daniel Jones. The issue was all the collateral damage that comes with paying Daniel Jones. Number one, the lack of team success that comes with it. Because you're handicapped to paying this guy $40 million a year. You can't pay the rest of your roster. Also, the fact that you're alienating the rest of your roster. Who the hell wants to play?
That fucking guy we're paying.
Well, it's also like, damn, I have to go play. This is my quarterback. He is not going to go and win us games. He is going to go and actively screw them up. The good news, that silver lining, guys, they can cut him after this year. Now, you're going to have to eat some cap, as you do with all these big QB contracts. The Giants can get from some of that money and get him off the roster after this year, after the complete disaster. So you can restart after this year. The Giants last season, granted this was with Tommy DeVito and a little bit of Danny Dimes, posted the number 30 scoring offense. They were number 29 in points per drive, number 30 in yards per drive, number 30 in yards per play, and they had the number 30 passing offense. And they no longer have Saquon Barkley. So that's the issue. You have lost your best offensive player by far. It's not even close. And now you are putting the keys solely in the hands of Daniel Jones and Malik Neighbors. And I love Malik. I think Malik is going to make Daniel a little bit better whenever he can touch the ball, whenever you can get that boy the ball in space. And I think the pass rush and the defensive front should be good, better than last year. You have Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Azeez Ojulari. I think they should be able to get pressure. But I really worry about this passing defense. They were number 24 last year. Now you lose Xavier McKinney, one of the best safeties in the league. And so I just put all this together. I look at the recipe that we got cooking. Offense is in shambles. You've got Malik Neighbors, nobody else. You're going to see if Daniel Jones and this bad offensive line with no real other talent than Neighbors, they're going to be one of the worst offenses in football. And then defensively, they might be able to get pressure, but what are they doing on the back end? Not a whole lot. I feel bad for your boy, Carson. I feel bad for Brian Dable. I think Dable is a good offensive mind. I think he's a decent head coach. I think he's a little bit of a hothead. I'd be pretty damn hot, too, if my quarterback was Daniel Jones or Tommy DeVito. So I think at the end of this year, the Giants are probably going to hit the big reboot, retool this entire team, get a brand new coaching staff, get a brand new quarterback. I would not be surprised at all if Drew Lock is starting by the end of this season.
Agreed.
And I think they're probably going to let Brian Dable go and go be the offensive coordinator for somebody somewhere else. And he is probably going to share an unfair load as, the scapegoat for this team. I just don't see it, Carson. I would love to hear somebody argue why this team could win 5 or more games. I don't see it on the schedule. This is a tough schedule. Again, you have Daniel Jones at quarterback. That guy scares me with his eyes in the presser, man. He's got that 1,000-yard stare going on, dude. He's seen some things, man. Yeah.
I think so.
I think the Giants are going to be one of the handful of worst teams in the NFL next year, man. And could very well be the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah, dude. You know what? I had them at 4 wins. I'm moving them down to 3. Just because I have a feeling that, there's going to be other teams that I'd rather reward. I really do think that the Giants suck. I really think that they probably are the worst team in football. And it all starts with the offense, and it all starts with Danny Dimes. I cannot think, Logan, of a more ridiculous quarterback to be entering his 6th year as a starter with the same team. The closest I could think was David Carr getting a full 5 years with the Texans, but they didn't bring him back for 6. You have the guys who are middle of the road who you get stuck with, right? You can start in 2011 with Andy Dalton, then you blink and it's 2019 and he's still your quarterback. You can spend the better part of a decade with a Derek Carr, but those guys are fine, right? You can win with those guys. Danny Dimes is not that. Danny Dimes is bad. Danny Dimes is awful. Can you think of a guy to get this much run with one team?
No, I'm racking my brain. And even those are unique scenarios too. Dalton, wildly successful as a regular season quarterback, right? One of the biggest playoff letdown quarterbacks of all time, but he was successful. Kirk Cousins might be the equator, but regular season successor. Derek Carr.
He's north of the equator, Logan. We always have to bicker on this. He's somewhere between Mexico City and El Paso.
He was the equator for a while. He's traveled north since then.
Yeah, early Washington Kirk. Kirk's pretty good, man.
And Derek Carr, wildly successful in the regular season. He had his issues and his flaws. And even David Carr, right? Worst offensive line consistently in the National Football League, right? I'll cut him a little slack there. Mm-hmm. He was pretty bad too, but
Danny Dimes had an awful offense. He's always had an awful offensive line as well.
He's had a pretty bad offensive line, but he's had Saquon. He's had some receiving talent, but he has not been an elevator. Give me a minute. I'm going to rack my brain here for a minute and see if I can think of anybody.
Rack your brain. I think wildly successful for the Andy Daltons and the Derek Carrs might be a little strong, but I mean, they're way, way better than Danny Dimes.
I mean, the Bengals were winning the AFC North every year. Bengals won a lot.
They weren't winning a lot because of Andy Dalton, though. They were winning a lot because of their defense. They were winning a lot because of their skill position talent. Andy was kind of just, floating the ship. But Danny couldn't do that. I really don't think he could. Last year when he was healthy, he threw 2 touchdowns to 6 picks, averaged 5.7 yards per attempt. Unbelievable stuff from the GOAT himself. I do not think he is better than Tyrod Taylor. I do not think he is better than Drew Lock, and I'm with you. I would definitely expect to see Drew Lock starting at some point this year. I just think you're going to reach the breaking point, man. Remember when people were arguing that Danny Dimes was top 10 after 2022?
No, I
yes,
don't
dude,
remember that.
I swear to God. I don't want to cast aspersions upon the wrong outlet, but I think I remember CBS having him as the number 9 quarterback. Somebody had him as the number 9 quarterback.
Who said that? Take his mic away. Take his editing software away. What?
We'll have to find it, Logan. It was a written article, if I remember correctly, or I saw a graphic or something. So unless it's been wiped from the web, it's out there, and we will hold you accountable. But you've always been right on Danny, man. He sucks. I think that he sucks even more than I thought after the 2022 season. But it's not just him, right? The offensive line is atrocious. They lost their best player in Saquon. I think Malik Neighbors will be very, very good, but adding him reminds me of the classic Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase graphic when the Bengals were debating who they should take to pair with Burrow, right? Where it's like Joe with Jamar, and he's just getting sacked. It doesn't matter that Jamar's wide open downfield, whereas with Sewell, it's like, hey, at least he's getting protected. That's like the situation that you have with the Giants, except instead of Joe Burrow, it's Danny Dimes who sucks on his own and they can't protect him. I just don't think that Neighbors can be the saving grace for this offense. They were already in the number 30 unit last year, and now you lose Saquon, who was by far the best part of that offense. Devin Singletary just had his best season. He's still a big downgrade. So I definitely think that this is a bottom 3 offense in football, probably the worst offense. And then I do like the front 7 a lot. You add an elite player in Brian Burns, and you return Lawrence and Bobby Okereke and Kayvon Thibodeau. Like, that's a talented group, but the secondary is looking quite bad. Losing McKinney, you mentioned how much they struggled against the pass last year. Deonte Banks is very solid, but I really, really worry about every other corner and safety spot. Like, I think this secondary is bad. And last year, this unit was the 26th scoring defense, 22nd in yards allowed per drive, even while ranking first in takeaways with 31. That's really, really alarming when you can be that bad defensively while having the most luck-based variable going in your favor more than anybody else. I'm concerned. So I think the defense can be fine. I don't think it's nearly good enough to compensate for, again, probably the worst offense in football to even get them to like 6-7 wins. I was teetering between 3 and 4. I'm going to go bold. I'm going to say 3. I think this is the worst team in the NFC and probably the worst team in football.
I like the take. I figured out who it was. Unfortunately, CBS Sports analyst Douglas Clawson came out with that.
Douglas.
Daniel Jones, number 8. And Greg Jennings also had a Daniel Jones top 10 take. So, shout out,
I remember
man.
that it was CBS. Look at that. How about that?
I've come up with 3 names that I can really say they got way too much burn. One, by far the fewest burn out of all these guys, Jeff George got 4 years, which is his rookie contract with Indianapolis. The other 2 guys, same franchise, both also number 1 picks. Nerd Sesh favorite, Vinny Testaverde. Vinny got 6 years in Tampa, include seasons where he threw 13 TDs and 35 picks. Another season where he had 8 TDs and 15 picks. Yeah. And then 14 TDs and 16. And then the other guy, Jameis Winston, 5 years, living out his rookie contract.
But Jameis is so much better than Danny.
So I'd say the only real comp is Vinny, man. Is Nerd Sesh legend Vinny Testaverde.
Yeah, and you know what? Vinny, turn it around, man. Maybe Danny just needs a second chance. Maybe he needs Baltimore. Maybe he needs his Jets.
Which, if you guys have heard this story on this pod before, I apologize. As I mentioned every time we talk about with Vinny and Jameis, somehow the Buccaneers took 2 quarterbacks who were technically colorblind. Neither of these guys could see who they were throwing the ball to. So we can even cut those guys some slack, man. Like, unless Danny Dimes has some sort of optical condition.
Well, to be fair, his eyes are weird. We have established there's something going on there. I think he might be seeing actual ghosts. I think he might be like the kid from the Sixth Sense. I think he might see the ghost of Lawrence Taylor bearing down on him every time out there.
Straight I don't know, PTSD man. For Danny Dimes, man.
Yeah. And listen, who can blame the Bucs for holding on to Vinny? They had never had a good season in their franchise's history, you know?
Handsome, charismatic, you know, he's an enigma.
Had aura.
Man. I get that.
Yeah.
Danny, I never got, man.
No, Danny does not have it. Shout out to the CBS analyst who, God knows who he had him above. Do you still have that in front of you? Who's 9 and 10, I wonder?
Let me get that one back up.
Yeah. Anyways, Giants are going to be really bad, man. Really, really bad.
I'm sorry. It was a technicality. Clutch QBs. QBs.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, we all, Danny is incredibly clutch.
Let's run through this real quick. Last Number
right.
10, Justin Herbert. Number 9, Lamar. Number 8, Daniel Jones. Number 7, Joe Burrow. Number 6, Dak Prescott. Number 5, Jared Goff. Number 4, Josh Allen. Number 3, Jalen Hurts. Number 2, C.J. Stroud. Number 1, Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, wow. So this was... Wait. So this was last year still? C.J. Stroud was ranked?
This was after last year.
Oh, my God. That's even worse than I thought. Bro, Danny Dimes had 1 year where they won like 4 close games.
That dude has to be hedging his bets. He has to have something going on with Daniel Jones where he's got to hold his stock, man.
That's insane. Well, we, Logan, are ditching all the stock. Actually, you shorted the hell out of it, so you're making millions right now.
Dude, I sold mine, I think, after the first year.
Yeah. Well, the first year was the best it ever got, so you sold
maybe the
high.
Second season. Maybe the second
you sold high.
season.
That was smart. That was the right play. All right, guys. Giants fans, feel for you, pray for you, hope for you. Maybe there is light on the horizon somewhere. I just think moving on from Daniel Jones will be therapeutic. It will be healing. It's very sad to watch every fan base at some point have to ardently argue that their quarterback, especially when he's highly drafted, is the guy, that he's actually good, that he needs more time, that he needs a better line, he needs better weapons, or there's something that you're missing in the numbers or the film. Sometimes the guys just suck. And yeah, Logan, you just had this with Russell. You just had this with Kenny Pickett, and then you had it with Russell Wilson, and you've already realized 2 weeks in the preseason that he sucks.
And then I saw 8 snaps of Russell Wilson play football in a Steelers uniform, and I about exploded.
Yeah, and that's going to be so much better for your mental health overall. You can let go of that tension, and you can just accept that he is your quarterback for now, but he's bad. Yeah,
he sucks. Justin Fields is better.
Giants fans, I hope that you can all reach that place this year. But please also don't then start to embrace Drew Lock as the future just because he's better than Danny Dimes. Just be at peace with sucking for a little bit. That's the thing some people might say about the Brian Burns move. You know, why do that when you're going to win 3 games? I don't know. But that's just the Giants for you at the moment. Dayball, probably going to be gone after this year. Come back to the Bills, buddy. We'd love to have you as our OC. All right, appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, hope you enjoyed. If you did, the good news is there is plenty more Nerd Sesh content. We are working our way through all of these divisions. We ranked the top 10 defenders in the NBA last week, so if you're fiending for NBA content, we still have that. Have a historical video essay on the NBA coming out soon as well. We've done a bunch of trivia content, trivia collabs throughout the summer that you can find on our YouTube channel or across audio platforms. And if you want all of our trivia content, all of our TikToks, that is at NerdSesh on TikTok and Instagram. Twitter is at nerd_sesh. You can check us out across all of those handles. You can also check out our merch if you want at thevolume.com, and you can join our Discord to chat with the fellas to further the discourse in this world. The link to that is also at the link tree across our social media bios. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.